I'd like to start by thanking Miriam for this wonderful conference. It's great to be here. In fact, the thing I'm most proud of is the title of my paper. Does Rabbi Sachs's religious pluralism result in the collapse of orthodoxy? When people ask me what I'm going to talk about, I give them the title. They want the short answer. You're going to get the slightly longer answer, I'm afraid. I think all presenters at conferences now should be under an obligation to confirm that their presentation has not been written by ChatGPT. I can confirm that. When my kids were very small at primary school, one of the parents used to wear a T-shirt that offended me very much. This was a religious primary school. And the T-shirt said, "God is too big for any one religion." And I thought it was inappropriate.
Can you put that on the other side?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but this is a part of the story.
Do I start again? I thought it was inappropriate for a parent to wear such a T-shirt at a religious school. But then about 20 years ago, I read The Dignity of Difference. And it was a book that changed my life. It changed my life from a Jewish perspective, and especially how I viewed other religions. And about 5 years ago, I started thinking about religious pluralism. The most famous line, probably, that Rabbi Sachs ever wrote was in the first edition of The Dignity of Difference. I'm shocked. I don't think anyone's actually said this line yet, right? We've got to this point where he said, "God has spoken to mankind in many languages, through Judaism to Jews, Christianity to Christians, and Islam to Muslims." Page 55. Now, this may be about revelation. It may be. But in an earlier book, Radical Then, Radical Now, which nobody criticized him for, they all missed this one. He says, "And to believe that one language is true, the other's false, is absurd. So too to believe the idea that one religion is true and the other's false is equally absurd." And here, the problem that we have is to understand what Rabbi Sachs meant by truth. Now, he said he wasn't a pluralist. I've been looking for references to that. There is a fascinating interview in a volume with Chava Tirosh Samuelson, where he said, "I'm not a pluralist." He also said, "I'm not a postmodernist." He was worried about relativism. So how do we understand these two quotes, amongst others found in Rabbi Sachs's writings? So a good place to start is to think about a taxonomy of how we look at other faiths. And the first person to really do this was Alan Race in 1983. He was looking at how Christians could look at other faiths. And he used the categories of exclusivism, inclusivism, and pluralism. And Alan Brill, in his book, hi Alan, in 2010, he included universalism, which was not in the original taxonomy of Alan Race. I'm going to try and define these terms as I go along. They're not easy, but I'll give a brief idea of what we might understand from them. So we'll start with exclusivism. It's the easy one for religious people. I'm right, everyone else is wrong. Judaism, my faith, is true. All other faiths are false. Now, Rabbi Sachs wrote in One People that a non-Jew does not have to leave her own faith to achieve salvation. And in The Dignity of Difference, he said, there is at least some truth to be found in other faiths. Now, there is a difference here between salvation and truth, but ultimately he's saying it's not the case that Judaism as a faith has all the truth and everyone else is false. There is some truth in other faiths. And when I read this quote from William Cantwell Smith, I could hear Rabbi Sachs writing it himself. Cantwell Smith wrote, It's far too sweeping to condemn the greater majority of mankind to lives of utter meaninglessness and perhaps to hell, simply on the basis of what seems to some individuals the force of logic. I can see people smiling. You can hear Rabbi Sachs saying that, right? Rabbi Sachs was clearly not an exclusivist. Inclusivism is slightly harder to define. I'm going to define it as one faith has all the truth, in our case Judaism, and other faiths have some truth. Now, it could be that they have some truth viewed from the faith which has all the truth, or they just have some truth, right? But inclusivism has to start with the fact that Rabbi Sachs would have to believe that Judaism has all of the truth. Now, he did believe that Judaism has some truth, but he didn't believe it had all the truth. Sounds radical, right? In Dignity of Difference, he wrote, "Truth on earth is not, nor can it aspire to be, the whole truth. It's limited, not comprehensive." And this means that not only Judaism, but no faith can have all of the truth. And therefore, inclusivism as a model for understanding other religions is also not one that Rabbi Sachs would have signed up for. Now, I said it's radical to say that for the chief rabbi to suggest that we don't have all the truth. So I thought I'd bring a frum source, not frum from Rome, Rafi, a frum source from the 16th century on a commentary on Pirkei Avot. "For the wisdom and the esoteric knowledge of the Torah are infinite, and it is impossible that they should all be passed to a human being who is finite." So Rabbi Sachs was not alone. And inclusivism as a model for understanding other religions is not one that he would agree with. Now it gets fun. So Rabbi Sachs said he wasn't a pluralist. But in One People, he said that Judaism is pluralist to other faiths. And various Jewish writers, thinkers, have argued that Rabbi Sachs was a religious pluralist. Brill argues for some form of moral or epistemological pluralism. Miriam for postmodern pluralism. My supervisor, Sam Lieben's epistemological pluralism. It's been suggested to me that it wouldn't be wise to stand here as a grad student and say that the organizer of the conference and my supervisor are wrong. So I'm just going to say they didn't go far enough. They didn't go far enough because I believe that Rabbi Sachs was a much deeper pluralist than any of these thinkers. And I want to defend a position in my paper that his pluralism was a much more metaphysical form of pluralism. And that he followed, although interestingly, I couldn't find a quote of John Hicks in any of Rabbi Sachs's works. If anyone can confirm that, I can say, well, ChatGTP said that he didn't, okay? So I did say, well, my presentation was not written by ChatGPT, but I did ask that question. But John Hicks, probably the most famous religious pluralist, and he borrowed Kant's ideas. And he said that the only access to the divine that we can have, the noumena, the ultimate reality, which is unreachable, is through our phenomenological experience. Cultures, languages, religions. It sounds like Rabbi Sachs to me. And Hick had another limb. This was his first limb, noumena and phenomena. The second limb was religious truth as myth. And he said the relationship between the ultimate noumenon and its multiple phenomenal appearances, or between limitless transcendent reality and our many partial human images of it, makes possible mythological speech about the real. Thus, the truth of a myth is a practical truthfulness. A true myth is one which rightly guides us to a reality about which we cannot speak in non-mythological terms. This really sounds like Rabbi Sachs to me. But, and I only have a few minutes, there are many challenges to Hick, many challenges to Hick, and I'm very aware of them. And the problem is that those who challenge Hick suggest that we're left in an uncomfortable position where we're either all deceived because we've got this impartial idea about a God that we can never quite get to, or we're still for monotheism, that we end up in a position of polytheism. So we all believe in different versions in his mind of the same God, but we all have different gods. So Hick runs into deep water. Now, the chidush, the novelty of my paper, is that I want to defend Hick, and I'm going to use the writing of Crispin Wright. All I'm going to tell you about Crispin Wright is he argues that there can be multiple contradictory truths. Faith A says X, faith B says Y, they totally contradict each other, that's fine. Crispin Wright's papers on truth are hard to read, that's an understatement, and hard to understand. In fact, I did ask, you realize I do like artificial intelligence, I asked ChatGPT to summarize Crispin Wright's theory in 150 words. I think I crashed the server. So, Wright is essentially a minimalist with regards to truth, and he introduces the idea of platitudes, and his theory of pluralism can be described as discourse pluralism. And his writing is extensively defended and attacked, but defended by Michael Lynch. See my paper soon. But Rabbi Sachs, in his introduction to the Machzorim, and he said to me many times, if you want to see the good stuff in my writings, read the introduction to my Siddur and my Machzorim. And that's a piece of advice you should all take away. But he quotes the Dibuk in the introduction to the Machzor, where Ansky says, at a certain hour, on a certain day of the year, the four supreme sanctities met together on the Day of Atonement, the holiest day of the year. The holiest person, the high priest, entered the holiest place, the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem, and there pronounced the holiest word, the divine name. Now that there is no temple, wherever a person stands to lift his eyes to heaven becomes a holy of holies. Every human being created by God in his own likeness is a high priest. Each day of a person's life is the Day of Atonement. Every word he speaks from the heart is the name of God. The use of mythical language and truth is very reminiscent of Hick's argument, and I think Rabbi Sachs was a pluralist, but I'll have a caveat in a second. The last category, which is even harder than pluralism, is universalism. This is my subject of research. And Rabbi Sachs often referred to universalism. He talked about the universal message of Judaism, which for me is exclusivism. He talked about the fact that man was created in the image of God. Well, that's true, but it doesn't tell us anything about truth. And he talked about the Noahide laws, which are universal, but really, I would argue, are coming from a position of exclusivism. So in a very fine book by Malka Simkovich, The Making of Jewish Universalism, she has this definition. All people, regardless of religion, have access to a relationship with the Israelite God and the benefits which he promises to those loyal to him without demanding that they convert or participate in the Israelite community as a Jew. So was Rabbi Sachs a universalist? Well, he talks about the division between Chokhmah and Torah, and I was reviewing recently future tense, and at the end of the book, I saw this amazing section where he says that Bezalel, in building the Mishkan, the tabernacle, used Chokhmah and not Torah. and that Moshe couldn't understand how to build the Mishkan. And I wonder here whether Moses was in some way limited by only being able to access Torah and not Chokhmah. Chokhmah, it seems, is Rabbi Sachs's way of saying there's a universal truth that everyone can access. There's a truth in all faiths. We've already established that. But each individual, and Rabbi Sachs often referred to the universalism of the first 11 chapters of Sefer Bereshit, each individual has a route to God with or without faith. So perhaps Rabbi Sachs would agree that there is ultimately one truth which is available to all. So the short answer is no, it doesn't result in the collapse of orthodoxy, you'll be happy to hear. The longer answer is, it seems to me that we have to look a little bit more subtly. Rabbi Sachs was inclusivist to all Jews, not inclusivism in terms of truth, as Daniel Reinhold said yesterday. He was pluralist in relation to other faiths, and he was a universalist with regards to all of humanity. Thank you very much.